Hey guys, Tightrope here, and in this video we're taking a look at the 1.50 changes for the Axis factions. And on top of that, we're looking at the hotfix that got released earlier today. The 254 Recon Tractor, when you go Vet 1 and use the lockdown ability, the number of shells the barrage has been reduced from 24 to 14. So we're going to try it out here against a few targets. First off against an anti-tank gun.
Confirmed. Yes, sir.
Oops.
Utility vehicles. Ordnance confirmed. Battery
Can you
fire
smoke? Oh, we can still see. Alright, only just got the decrew there. Crazy scatter in the end.
We're receiving you.
Close to not getting a decrew on an AT gun that didn't move whatsoever.
Yes, we can do that. On, moving to
So
location.
now we're going to
On the
try it
double.
against some emplacements here. We've got a mortar pits.
Christian, confirm heading. I'll get us there.
First off, we're going to try it on
Battery.
the M2A1. Yeah, 480 health on this.
394.
At Vet 0. I think it goes up to 720 health at Vet 3, which is pretty hard to get to. Decrew, but no kill. Very close to a kill. Maybe with better scatter. If you get a kill. And the mortar pit, I think this has
We have a heading.
620 health, 640 health, something like that.
By
What do you see here? 642.
We got wounded.
Not even half health off that. And look at this, the Vet 3 mortar pit has an unbelievable 1352 health. That is a crazy amount.
Ordnance confirmed. Battery fire away.
Let's see how it goes against this.
Keep your asses down.
I'll do a bit better against this than it did against this one. Maybe better scatter this time
What
around.
is it?
But yeah, I don't know. This is a curious change for me. You know, I felt like the problem with this was maybe how fast the shells came in, and maybe they need to come in like half a second to a second later to give more time for team weapons to dodge, rather than the outright number of shells that they drop down being too powerful. I think that's the nerf I would have gone for. The 250 has had a nerf to its frontal armor, going from 7 down to 5.5. This is a strange nerf to me. Like, originally, the 250 had 6 armor on the front, which felt about right to me, honestly. Then they buffed it up to 7. It did feel like the 250 was a little bit too strong at 7. Now they're nerfing it back below where it was originally, to 5.5. I do worry the 250 is going to be a little bit too weak. And Afrika Korps are pretty reliant on the 250. You know, it's a big part of their coolant system in the early game. So, you know, and a lot of units rely on the 250 to get the combined arms buff. So if the 250 is weak, kind of rules out using a lot of units, like Panzergrenadiers and stuff become a lot less effective if the 250 is less effective. Stacked on top of that, you know, the Dingo did just get buffed in this patch as well. So, you know, they buffed up one of the best counters to the 250 as well. So this is a strange over-nerf, I feel. After you build your final tech structure, the Panzerarmee Kommand, and upgrade armored reserves, the coolants you have available here have been altered significantly this patch. Starting out on the far left, this one used to come with a Panzerjager, now comes with a Panzer Pioneer equipped with a grenade launcher. It's also had a cost reduction in terms of manpower and fuel. So I will say that, you know, in the very late game, by the time you've unlocked all this stuff, which will be, you know, probably about 25 minutes onwards, a grenade launcher might not be very useful. You probably want a minesweeper instead. And, you know, having a squad like that just kicking around might actually kind of hold you back in terms of, like, taxing you and not providing much value to your army. So I think that's kind of a bad change. I don't think I'll see anybody using this. And overall, you know, if you build these two units individually, Panzer Pio and Panzer 3, you're only saving 20 manpower going for this call-in, and you lock yourself out of any other call-ins until the cooldown's done. So I think this is a bad option. They've also changed the price on the Panzer IV call-in. Pretty significant discount on this now, and I could actually see this getting some play. You know, if you need an extra squad of infantry in the late game, especially if you've already got some of these upgrades, you know, the Panzer IV with a bunch of these Afrika Korps upgrades is a real weapon, and don't underestimate it. I think it's very good. So if you need a squad as well, maybe you're trying to stall for the Tiger, but it's just kind of out of reach, you're low on infantry, I think the Panzer IV Assault Group will probably see a lot more action now with this cost reduction, and the Stug G Assault Group also a cost reduction there. So yeah, no changes to the Tiger though. Everything else got cost reduced, but Tiger still very expensive. I think this is fine overall. As I said, the Panzer III Assault Group, I think that's a bad change, but the other two getting cheaper. It's pretty hard to afford these at the end of the game, and you can only call them in every now and again. They've got a long cooldown. Well, I've got instant cooldowns on, but they typically have a very long cooldown, so I think this is fine. You can't, it's not like you spam them at this cheap price. The Italian Combined Arms Battle Group has received a lot of changes this patch. First off, Pact of Steel has been increased in cost from 1 to 2 command points. I don't really have a strong opinion about this. I suppose War Machine for US forces does a similar thing and costs the same amount of command points, so maybe that's fair. These two abilities have had their range buffed, so up to 35 range, same as Combined Arms, which is a change I asked for, and I think it makes a lot of sense to have these be the same as Combined Arms. Otherwise, it's kind of weird, you know, you're losing access to these buffs, but you still have Combined Arms. It's kind of confusing. So I think having all three of those buffs at the same range is quite nice. And I think this will, you know, help you like park a 250 between 2 points and capture them with one squad each on some maps, or kind of facilitate that, which I think is, you know, very on theme for Afrika Korps, having your vehicles supporting your infantry. So yeah. If you're unfamiliar with what these buffs do, this one gives you 7.5 vision range. It's not incredible, but this one's pretty good. Faster capture and decapture rate when you're near a vehicle. So you can see there, that captured really, really fast. So this buff here is actually quite nice, and yeah, you know, the 250/9 strats, they're back on the menu, boys. They also buffed the strafe in this battle group, now has a bonus against vehicles, so we'll see how it goes against a squad of infantry, and then a vehicle afterwards. So I think they did also change anti-infantry strafes to do more damage. It's 60 damage total there. Was that one lined up with the general changes that we saw earlier? I feel like there's less than what I was expecting. Either way, 60 damage, it's okay. So it does against this Sherman here. 110 damage. Alright, well that's not very good against a tank, really. I think you'll still be trying to use this against infantry, and that's 120 munitions? Compare that to the loiter that Spec Ops just got. I feel like that's kind of underwhelming. The Carro Armato has received a couple nerfs. Its long-range accuracy has been reduced ever so slightly, not a huge deal, but also its damage cap has been reduced now, from 3 to 2 models. So I think one of the situations where we'll notice this most is, say, if you're like flank a team weapon and you start blasting with the Carro, like if you know, driving from the side, get around the side, start nuking it, how quickly it manages to knock out team weapons. So let's see. Notice a bit of a difference here. Alright. Gonna slow down the time to kill a little bit. Still looked okay there. Obviously it scattered one shot pretty far wide. Still looked okay. The Semovente's Vet 1 ability Heat Round has been altered. I think now it's the same as the Tread Shot that the Stuart has, right? So always penetrates, bonus damage, minus 80% to speed and rotation rate for 5 seconds. I think this does make some sense to try and standardize these abilities a bit. Makes it less confusing, and easier to remember what everything does. So I'm on board with that. They also made it so it tracks correctly. So I used to have an issue where if the vehicle kind of left it and was driving around the side, the Semovente would just stay locked in and just sit there with this kind of active but not doing anything. Quite frustrating. So we'll see how it goes here. We're going to try use it against the Greyhound here. So yeah, the ability stays active. Doesn't really go off because this Greyhound's too fast. But eventually, once it can lock onto it, it shoots it off there. So that's exactly what I was hoping for. Nice tracking on the heat round now. The artillery cover ability got a load of buffs this patch. First off, a cost reduction by 25 munitions. And then also the delay between each subsequent set of shells coming down has been heavily reduced for both the anti-infantry shells and the anti-tank shells. I think they said the mortar shells come down faster as well. So let's see how we go. We've got 2 tanks, a few team weapons, a few squads in here. Let's see how it goes.
Commandant, you have available command point.
Alright, this improved. Probably worth using. Seems solid, especially if your opponent's got like a big built up position with lots of team weapons and tanks. They'll need to get out of there pretty quickly while this is going on. Now I could imagine in like team games, this lasts a long time, like dropping this down on a victory point that your enemy team needs to cap. This is like a big zone denial tool. This will be really powerful in those kind of scenarios. So yeah, look out team game players, artillery cover is coming for you. The recovery half-track has its vet requirements massively reduced. Now you'll be at vet 3, and before you would have only been at like vet 1.25. So it's going to be super easy to vet this up now. Remember, it only does gain support veterancy. I have been playing with this a lot more recently with Afrika Korps. I didn't have a good feel of how hard it was to vet up yet. But you notice that it gains repair rate bonuses at both vet 1 and vet 2. So this thing could be doing some turbo crazy, like super fast repairs very easily because you'll be hitting vet 2 very, very fast in games now. So watch out for the recovery half-track. This thing could be really strong. The Flak 36 or 88 has had a range improvement, going from 70 to 75 range, so from here out to here now. So a slight buff to it there. I think that's a pretty safe buff. Last patch, I think I saw 2 of these made total, like in all my shoutcasts, all my games, and neither of them were very good. So I think that's a fine, slight buff to its range. I will say that sometimes towing is still a little bit fussy and prone to bugging out. So this was a pretty smooth pickup this time around, honestly, considering the positioning, but sometimes your truck kind of gets stuck and it like is unresponsive, and then after like 10 seconds it kind of latches on somehow and then it drives away. So I think still there's a little bit of work to be done on the towing system that would help make both this and the 17-pounder a little bit more responsive. The Flakvierling got 2 nerfs, one to its speed, going from 6.9 to 6.2, and that's a pretty important breakpoint because previously it was faster than a lot of its competition, like the Greyhound, Chaffee, Stuart, at 6.9. I think most of those are around 6.5. It was slightly faster. Now at 6.2 it's slightly slower, so it's not going to be able to outrun those. So you're going to need to be a lot more careful with your Flakvierling positioning, because you're not going to be able to run away from those other light vehicles at that timing anymore. Also to acceleration, which doesn't matter as much, with the instant acceleration style of movement, but still will make differences. So yeah, a bit slow on the Flakvierling. I don't really have a strong opinion about whether this was necessary or not. I actually barely fought against it in the previous patch. Like pretty much everyone was spamming L6s, so don't really know exactly how strong the Flakvierling was, in the state of the meta. The Panzer III's pintle machine gun got some massive buffs this patch. First off, the damage per bullet went from 3 to 5, So 66% upgrade straight away right there. Then on top of that, got an accuracy bonus at close and mid-range. So it's going to be doing way more damage. Apparently this brings it up to the same as the pintle upgrade that's on the Panzer IV. So what we're going to try here is, this one's got the pintle upgraded, this one doesn't. It's kind of interesting to see that you don't have like any icon indicating that you've got that upgrade, by the way. And we're going to try them out against a squad of riflemen at pretty close range where the machine gun buff has been felt the most. There's a bit of RNG involved here. I will say that like previous to this, a lot of players didn't even bother upgrading the machine gun. And just save that munitions for off maps and stuff instead. So yeah, it's not like a night and day difference, but it's definitely more consistent with that machine gun. A little bit faster there overall. And probably worth going for again. Maybe worth considering instead of going for those off maps, or saving for them at least. The Panzerarmee Kommand has come down in cost by 50 manpower and 10 fuel, making it a more appealing option, especially combined up with all the buffs that were seen to the other units you can build from it. I do still think the walking Stuka is a little bit on the weak side, at least every time I've seen it in the previous patch, so maybe that could still do with a buff. So overall, definitely a lot more appealing to go for Panzerarmee Kommand. But I will say that, you know, reducing costs of things like this and the call-ins and whatnot, maybe it's not addressing the root cause of Afrika Korps' maybe kind of questionable late game. I think ultimately, you know, they struggle so much for manpower in the late game Afrika Korps. And unless you've upgraded like all of these side upgrades, which is very tough to do in 1v1s, more accessible in team games, and that's why Afrika Korps are very strong in team games, because they can access that strong, like all vehicle style late game. And ones, it's very hard to do that. And it's also, yeah, so you're struggling for manpower in the late game as Afrika Korps. And I think part of the reason is that they don't cheat any manpower, like really, compared to the other factions. They don't have a mid tent that goes out and with medics recovers guys to get free reinforcement with the casualty clearing. They don't have like a reinforced cost discount. They generally don't have like discounts to upkeep or anything in their battle groups. So they're over here playing like a relatively fair game in terms of manpower, and every other faction are not. And Afrika Korps have been able to keep up with that through a lot of like cheese strategies. You know, like our 6 spam, the Flakvierling's been strong, the 8 Rad up until recently, you know, was this absolute monster. The Martyrs have obviously been very good. But if you wanted to play anything else, if you want to play more of an infantry-based strategy with like Guastatori, but they're pretty good after the flamethrower on the move buff. Maybe they're just so strong they can overcome their high manpower keep. Or Basilieri, you just can't do it because you're not cheating any manpower. So I don't know if this is a problem with Afrika Korps or a problem with all the other factions, but yeah, it's definitely limiting, and maybe changes like this, reducing the cost of their tech, are more masking the overall issue rather than addressing it. Panzerjagers have received a large number of buffs this patch. First off, their anti-tank tear gas round, available at Vet 1, coming down in cost from 45 to 30 munitions. I think this is a really sensible change after its duration of the debuff got removed from 10 to 3, massively overpriced, so I think that's a good change. They also got 5 more health now, and their Panzer boxes themselves got a bunch of changes, reductions in aim time, and also about half a second faster reload now. So they're going to be a lot stronger. And they mentioned in the notes, you know, aimed at more like anti-tank performance, but 5 extra health and faster reload is going to help them against infantry as well. Stop the presses. There's been a hotfix. So basically they decreased the accuracy on the Panzerboxer against infantry to offset the reload bonus it got to help it against vehicles. So we'll try it out here against its closest competitor or equivalent on the Allied side. The Boys AT Rifle infantry section. Both, you know, pretty long range and point blank on the other side of cover. Let's see how we go. No upgrades, no Vet 1, no veteran squad leaders or anything. Just raw fighting power here. Looks like this section's winning, especially in the long range fights. It's a pretty comfortable win. Close range, it's a bit closer. It looks like the sections are still winning there though as well. It is having the extra model. It's just so much more health.
Anti-tank infantry have been killed at the front
So
line.
yeah. Yeah, good hotfix, I think, reducing their anti-infantry performance because Panzerjagers were already being built like 2 or 3 squads of them in most games before this patch. So I think it was nice of them to jump on a hotfix and reduce the anti-infantry firepower of them. Good job on that one rally. The Stug D got the same buff as the Scott to its vertical tracking speed. This is basically how fast it can raise its barrel. Going from 17 to 35, I think it is. Massive increase there. So basically, because it drives around with its barrel in the lower position, every time you came to shoot with it the first time, it would have to raise its barrel, it would delay the first shot coming through, make it feel less responsive. But now it's been fixed, so Stug D a bit more appealing. Hadn't seen a lot of play in the last patch. It was kind of on the edge of being viable, so I think this is a good change. The L6/40 has received a load of changes this patch. You know, it was definitely overperforming after the last round of buffs it got. So first off, they've reworked its cost. Came down in manpower by 50, but up in fuel by 15. You know, DAC are usually a bit more manpower bound. So it's interesting they reduced the cost there, but 15 more fuel means that if you do call in some L6s and you want to tech up later on, you know, you will feel that fuel. They've also reworked them in terms of AoE. Like basically they've dropped the model cap down from 3 to 1, so, and the AoE maybe doesn't even matter that much anyway, but the AoE has been massively reduced to like a tiny spot. The AoE radius is 0.15. That is like microscopic, so almost no AoE on them. They've also decreased the accuracy on them like massively on their guns, from 0.45 to 0.125 at long range. So it's like almost quarter the accuracy. So these things can be, oh, and they've slightly nerfed the speed from 7.5 to 7.2. So these things are maybe a little bit hard to quantify. So we'll do a more experiential test here. L6s, gonna chase down this section, double L6s. It was, you know, a realistic scenario in this game. Squads harassing the fuel, and the L6s arrive, chase it to base. That's what we're gonna be doing here. So we'll roll in over here. Once they get in range to maybe about here, I'll hit tactical pause and retreat this. On the, here we go. Okay, well that is way worse. This would be close to a squad wipe before. Now it's about quarter health off. So yeah, that's a pretty big nerf. That's like a very big nerf. You can of course upgrade them with the flamethrower. And this flamethrower is pretty good, but you know, it's 50 munitions, and then after that the L6 is hopeless against other light vehicles. I think one of the strengths of the L6 after the patch was it gained so much penetration, 2 of them could then effectively fight against the Greyhound and stuff like that. That's what made them, you know, besides the wiping power, that's what made them so powerful, because then they could actually fight back against opposing light vehicles as well. But that won't be the case if you go for the flamethrower. On top of that, you know, by going for the flamethrower, they'll lock you out of going for like a flamethrower on your Panzer pyros and stuff like that. It'll hurt you in other areas. So yeah, it's a big nerf to the L6s. The Armored Support Battlegroup has received a load of changes this patch. First off, the command tank has come down in command point cost from 4 to 3. I think this is probably fine. Command tank seems like a very fringe unit. I haven't really seen it used very effectively so far. You know, its aura buffs up the armor of nearby tanks. And the only time I've really seen that actually being good was in a 2v2 where somebody managed to get a Tiger out, and then the command tank to buff up the Tiger's armor. It's the only time I've seen it be relevant, and that's an extremely late game scenario. So decreasing the command point cost on it, I think it should be alright. They've also changed battlefield salvage, reduced its cost by 25 munitions, and made it last for 15 more seconds. You know, I don't think I've used battlefield salvage in the last 11 months, because all 3 of these abilities are so good, you're usually spending your munitions on this instead. But with these changes, it's worth considering trying again. They also changed Panzer Storm, reducing the speed bonus from 50% to 35%, but buffing up the acceleration and rotation rate to compensate for that. So I still kind of don't really like this ability. Like, the fact that it's immune to engine crits, I find to be very cheesy. I would kind of like it if it was one or the other, like immune to mines or immune to anti-tank grenades. Having it immune to everything is just like, there's no counterplay really. You know, you see players plant a whole bunch of mines and then it just only matters a little bit for damage. Yeah, I don't really like this ability, but glad to see a speed reduction. It lasts a very long time as well, Panzer Storm. Vehicle awareness also got changed. Now it's an activatable ability for 50 munitions, lasts for 60 seconds, and the range went from 60 up to 70. Yeah, I don't think anybody's going to be using this anymore. Maybe if it was 80, could see like a little bit of play, but 70 I don't think is enough for that muni cost. And as I said, like, there's so many good muni abilities in this battle group. Vehicle awareness, like, it's going to be extremely fringe use that you'd ever use this. I don't think this is, I think this is trashed here now. The Flame Panzer 3 got the same frontal armor buff that the regular Panzer 3 got in the previous patch, so it's just playing catch up here. The Wirbelwind is getting a cost increase from 50 to 60 fuel. I think this is a really good idea. You know, Wirbelwind spam was getting a little bit out of control, and they were arriving so early in the game, like before 9 minutes, which is crazy when you think in Code 2, a fast Flak Panzer would be like 13 minutes. This was arriving 4 minutes earlier than that. It just gave like no room for allied light vehicles to breathe, like Greyhounds, stuff like that, because this arrived so early on. And when combined up with mechanized, the in-combat repairs, or designate defensive line aura to just, you know, easily repair off any damage they took, they were very, very, very hard to stop. So yeah, very good idea that they've nerfed the fuel cost on this. Grenadiers have received a buff to their capture rate, now 1.25, same as most other main lines. Alright, I mean, I don't think this was the buff that many people were asking for. I think I saw on that spreadsheet people were asking for more health, or maybe like a change to transfer orders. Like, this basically never gets used because it's so expensive and you lose experience. So I was expecting maybe a change in one of those departments rather than to their capping rate, but you know, Grenadiers a little bit under strength, so you know, buff to them is maybe okay, but this didn't seem like the right buff. The Kettenkrad got nerfed this patch. Its decapture rate has been reduced, so you know, when you're driving onto enemy territory, how fast it decaptures, this got reduced. They also changed the communications cable upgrade. They've increased its cost from 25 to 40 munitions now, so you can't get it right away at the start of the game. You'll probably have to wait a bit over a minute into the game before you can go for this upgrade. But the upgrade gives you back that decapture rate to how it was pre-patch. So I don't know. A lot of players weren't even getting the communications cable upgrade because you kind of need that first dose of munitions for your Panzerschreck, your first Schreck. So this is going to make it tough, and you're going to be really sad if after, you know, a minute and a half into the game, you upgrade communications cables and then you lose this to like a dingo straight away. It's going to be tears. So I don't know. I worry that this might squeeze the Kettenkrad out of seeing any use. You know, with Grenadiers getting a buff to their capping, this getting a nerf, and this still being quite fragile. Yeah, I do worry. And on top of that, remember this recon mode also got nerfed a couple patches ago as well. So I do have some worries about the Kettenkrad's viability after this change, but we'll see how it goes. The MG42 Vet 1 ability, White Phosphorus rounds, has been buffed against units in cover. Now you get 25% more accuracy and damage against units that are in cover or garrisons. So we're going to try this out here. We're going to do like a raw attack here. There's no phosphorus. Phosphorus on this one versus a unit in cover. And then phosphorus on this one, unit out in the open. See how they all stack up and compare in terms of time to kill. So this one doesn't have to reload before shooting, so it starts firing earlier. Interesting, the time out in the open and in cover are actually kind of similar. Because of the bonuses you get, right, from being suppressed and pinned, kicking in. And this doesn't get suppressed or pinned. So it ended up taking more damage. Like, suppressed kind of like even things out. And then once it was pinned, this pinned squad got way more resilient and took way less damage than the unit that was in heavy cover. Interesting. I don't know how this got suppressed in heavy cover. That almost never happens. Alright, so this is going to be a real murder machine now, the MG42 with the phosphorus rounds against units in cover. I will say that, you know, a lot of other machine guns, pretty much every other machine gun, hasn't felt super good in the previous patch. They felt a little bit on the weak side. You know, like with the time to pin changes being so slow, it feels like machine guns like can't defend VPs against units. As soon as there's light cover in the VP area, it's just so easy for them to not get pinned and sit in their cap. Time to pin changes have been rough. And yeah, every other machine gun apart from the MG42 hasn't felt particularly good in the previous patch. Alright, well, yeah, this looks pretty damn good now. Panzergrenadiers got a buff to the accuracy. You've got the old value in blue, new value in red. See, it's a slight tickle, about 1.2 DPS more at the optimum range where the buff happened. So very, very slight buff to Panzergrenadiers. If we compare them to riflemen, like with the single bar, you see that Panzergrenadiers do lose from about 13 range onwards. That's just single bar, no fire superiority. As soon as they're up against double bar riflemen, it's a pretty handy win for the riflemen, especially when they've got more health, more scope for upgrades, more scope for free reinforce as well. Panzergrenadiers do get quite a lot stronger at Vet 2, it seems. We don't know what the buffs are though, so it's hard to say stuff about that. But yeah, I wouldn't expect this to push Panzergrenadiers into becoming relevant. It's a nice buff. I think they were a little bit on the weak side, but maybe not quite enough. The Nebelwerfer got a damage penalty when shooting at buildings and emplacements, similar to what a lot of other artillery pieces got in the previous patch. Though I will say this might be more of a nerf to allies than to Axis, because probably the most times that this was going to be shooting at buildings was when it got stolen by allies and then used against Italian coastal bunker formations. So I find that quite funny. The Mechanized Battlegroup has undergone a huge number of changes. We'll look at the left-hand side first. First off, the raid package has been increased in cost from 1 to 2. I think this makes sense because the smoke canisters part of this is just so good. Right from the first time you get a vehicle that can use it until the very end stage of the game. And especially while attack round into smoke was bugged. Don't know if it's fixed yet, I haven't tested that yet, but yeah, this is just so strong smoke on all your vehicles. I think this makes sense. But to compensate for that, to not affect the timings over here, these two have come down in command cost by 1. So these will be arriving at the same time. On top of that, we've got the call-in change here, where you can either call in the Panther or build it from your final tech structure. In this position, we used to have like a fuel bonus, where when you captured a new fuel point, you get a bonus of 5 fuel, which I did kind of enjoy using. Quite often, you could get maybe 10 extra fuel, hit a vehicle at a slightly faster timing, and just shake things up a bit. I enjoyed using that ability, but that's completely destroyed now. It's been replaced by mobile repair stations. 2 command points gives the 251 and 221 the ability to repair themselves and nearby vehicles when out of combat and stationary. That sounds really good to me, especially in team games. Having a look at the new mobile repair stations ability, it says here 6 health per second. I think in the notes it said 5.5, so I don't know which is correct. And it works on all variants. The regular 251, the mid, and the Stummel, all of them get this ability. So, oh, that's interesting.
Awaiting orders,
It says 5.5 here and then 6 here. Okay. I'd say 5.5 is probably right, and this has got an incorrect description. Anyway, we're going to have a repair race up against some Pios. They've got 8, and Pios with the sweeper gives them 10.5. So let's see how they go. We'll reduce these to a low amount of health. Have a repair race. You can see the range on this. This is really big range. I think that's 25 range. So, big aura. And I believe you can, yeah, I mean, it's aura, so you can repair like loads of stuff at once. Including itself.
What do you need?
So you can get crazy value out of this ability. And even just like using it on a 221 or something like that could open up a lot of opportunities. Like you could be capping and repairing with a 221 early on. Could be quite strong. So you can see the aura definitely noticeably slower than engineers, but you know, you're not paying anything for this. So, you know, if you're already going for like a mid-truck in a team game scenario especially, I think this could be really, really strong. So I just wanted to double check that this will work on my teammates' vehicles, and it does indeed. And one thing I noticed is that it works while the vehicle is driving around. The vehicle being repaired itself doesn't have to be stationary, just the repair crew does. Which I'm not sure about that. Could lead to some kind of cheesy scenarios. But this could change the shots to kill, you know, if you're backing up and then you back past your 221, you get a tickler repairs like even 10 more health, changes the shots to kill, and you end up winning a fight. I could imagine that actually happening quite frequently with this kind of repairing on the move. There's also been a shuffle round of all these abilities. These two used to be in the middle positions, and these two used to be in the end positions, and they'll be swapped around, which I think makes a lot of sense. This is obviously extremely strong, and part of the reason why Wirbelwind spam was so good, now that's coming in a bit later, especially if you want to go smoke alongside of this. So I think that's good. I think this is very good, getting these online earlier, especially if you're going to go down here, get your Stosstroop in, and then want to upgrade them with the STGs. Now it's going to be much more accessible. And I think the Respite makes sense to arrive at this timing. I think it's kind of quite comparable to the Bishop, and the Bishop arrives around this timing as well. So I think that's a sensible juggle, all these abilities switching around. The Italian Coastal Battlegroup has received a couple light nerfs. First off, the Bulwark ability. This one gives you bonus health and auto repair on your bunkers. It's gone up from 2 to 3 command points. I think this is fair enough. That's a very strong ability. Pushing this on a little bit later. Yeah, okay, I'm on board with that. They also changed Designate Defensive Line. Now it costs 15 munitions more, and it covers 5 range less. This I'm not so enthusiastic about. I don't really like this. What I don't like about this ability is the fact that it can repair vehicles. I don't like that. I think this could be like an interesting weakness for Italian Coastal, that you either need to keep Pioneers around or you need to build repair bunkers to repair your vehicles. But this being able to or repair vehicles, it just makes everything too easy about this battle group, you know. So I'm not satisfied with this nerf. They also changed the Artillery Officer's Artillery Observer Overwatch ability. Bit of a mouthful there. This one now has a 1.5 second delay added to it before the first round of shells start coming down. It doesn't affect subsequent sets of shells. So we'll see how this feels to play against. So I've got a machine gun here. This is US Forces one. I'm going to activate this. See how it feels to like dodge out of it, basically.
Laying zone for bombardment. Request. Incoming! Take goddamn cover!
Now, is that a cheat commands mod thing, or as the recipient of this barrage, do you not hear the chung 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 of the shells starting to come in, so this is harder to notice when this is activated?
We've been shoulder those guns. We're good to go.
Or is that, or do you just not hear that for anything? Maybe that's only for the activator's benefit, I don't know.
All right, they want us up
Either
front.
way, yeah,
MG, waiting on you.
this is probably a fine start. I do still think maybe as well that this Vet 3 area is so massive, maybe that could be reduced slightly, or Vet 2 or whatever it is. But yeah, it does make it feel quite a lot more fair, adding the extra delay. On to the hotfix changes, and already they've reverted some of the changes to the Royal Engineers. First off, their health has been reduced back to what it was pre-patch, and I think that's a good change overall. On top of that, they've also changed the build time. Now they're 10 seconds slower to build at the start of the game, which I also think is fair enough with the faster capping rates. You know, you'll make up that time with your faster capping on the first 2 points anyway, though it will maybe hurt your strategy slightly if you wanted to like rush straight towards a central fuel point, set up some sandbags and stuff like that. Okay, I think I'm okay with making that trade-off to open up more build variety. But they also nerfed their reinforcement cost, which was something I was a bit confused about. Oops, it's gone up by 2. Which, yeah, what? Why? It feels like these guys are getting punished for, you know, all other strategies are getting punished for the sins of this ability here, making them way cheaper right at the start of the game. So I'm not sure about the reinforced cost increase. That one seems to be out of place. The other two, like nerf hotfix changes, I'm on board with. This one feels like every other strategy is paying for the sins of this ability here. And I did see on Reddit some British players complaining, oh, Axis was strong for so long and Brits finally had something good and they got nerfed straight away. Look, here are the win rates for the couple days that patch was live. Brits 63%, Axis, USF 50-50, so USF aren't the ones keeping the Axis down. It's solely Brits. 20% disparity here. So look, just accept it. The wins you were getting, they weren't real. Accept it and move on, British players, all right? Also, one interesting thing to note from these stats is it seems like they accidentally gave the wrong weighting to the new maps. These are supposed to be boosted up so you get them more often, but it looks like they penalize them so you get them less often. So a bit of a mistake there on the map offering rates. The Greyhound Armored Skirts upgrade has been nerfed. Now it only gives 80 health instead of 120, so 40 less health, so 360 up to 440. This nerf doesn't really change the shots to kill from a tank or an anti-tank gun, still 4 shots from a tank, 3 shots from an AT gun, even with the 40 health or plus or minus, you know. So it doesn't make a huge difference in that occasion, this nerf. Maybe you'll probably take like 1 fewer anti-tank rifle shot now to kill. So it doesn't make a huge difference, though it does make you question if it's worth the munitions upgrade somewhat. I was wondering if maybe it should have been locked instead behind the Mechanized Support Center. Like basically nobody's been going Mechanized Support Center for the last like 9 months, right? So maybe if it was like integrated as part of the improvised armor upgrade, just overall, you know, 76mm Sherman's not that good. These smoke launchers are not that good. These could be okay if you're up against a lot of like Jägerschrecks, but it's not worth losing all the ISC bonuses just for something like this. And specialized munitions, okay, but again, it's not worth losing the ISC bonuses. Or maybe it's just because the ISC is so good. But either way, I thought maybe putting the armored skirts behind this instead would have enticed people into it, but instead it's just got nerfed. The British Training Centre has also been changed. You can no longer get any of these upgrades until you get Platoon Command Post. So it's the middle tech structure where you get like the Humber and the 6-pound AT gun from. Until you get that up, you can't go for any of these. So yeah, there were quite a few strategies which largely involved going for a lot of infantry early on, then upgrading them with infantry training. And these strategies have been pretty popular for the last like 4 months, one of the most popular ways to play Brits. And then generally, you know, you would have strong infantry for the first, 5 minutes, you'd have strong timing. Then the enemy light vehicles would arrive, you kind of have to fight back and play defensively, and then you generally be stalling for one of these call-ins, either the Centaur or the Crusader AA. And that's when you fight back onto the field and start to win again. But yeah, those strategies can no longer exist because you can't get the infantry training anymore. And even my old strategy that was briefly viable, like 3 Vickers with the team weapon training, can't do that anymore because it's all locked behind platoon command. So, I mean, that's a bit sad to lose some strategic diversity, because I think ultimately, again, it comes down to the call-ins being the problem rather than being able to take this straight away. Because, yeah, because you can kind of get these almost medium tank level strength units without having to take the final tech structure. So it allows you to get a lot stronger earlier on in the game without having to pay for it. And that's hard to handle for your opponent. So again, it's kind of coming down to the call-ins being the problem here, and other things getting caught in the crossfire. Speaking of the call-ins, they also did get nerfed in terms of cost. Both the Crusader and the Centaur, this up by 10 fuel, which I think now is quite a lot more expensive than the regular Crusader. Yeah, so this is 370, this is 360.80, and like, do you think it's worth the premium? I don't. So it feels like, again, you're paying like a tax because it's a call-in vehicle, paying more than you should for this unit because it's a call-in. So it feels like, again, we're dancing around the issue of call-in vehicles by overcosting them instead of locking them behind tech. And other things like the training center are getting caught in the crossfire. It's the same story with the Centaur as well. Like, don't think it's really worth its now new nerfed increased price. But maybe in the scope of things, with the way that the game is now, it needed to be done. I don't know. Summarizing my thoughts on the patch overall, I think a lot of the battle group, like shuffling around and ability changes, they've been very good, and there's a lot there that I'm excited to try out. But when it comes to everything else, I think overall they're heading in the right direction with a lot of these changes, but perhaps the exact changes they made were not what I would be doing. And it feels like overall all these like tweaks to the numbers and stuff are kind of pointless when we're not addressing what I feel are the core issues with the game, are the manpower cheats and the call-ins. Until those get addressed, feels like all these number tweaks just don't really matter, unfortunately, and will probably need to be like reverted or redone or destroyed once they fix call-ins and manpower cheats. Because that's, I feel, where the game is kind of getting off the rails and making things too strong or too weak. Certain strategies like can't keep up with each other. Because if you're not cheating manpower or you're not calling something in, at least in 1v1s, you can't really keep up. That's just how it is, right? Or unless you've got one unit which has been crazy broken, you can't keep up. And that's kind of been the tale of the game up until this point. Cheap manpower, call in, use a broken unit, or use like a really broken ability like the old Axis AT loiters. So yeah, hopefully they can do something about that and we can start to move forward on balance. But, you know, they are showing maybe signs. You know, they're tweaking, they're testing out the call-in changes on the Panther and the EZ8. So maybe they'll be thinking about doing some of these changes. And that will also help the game scale, I think, better between 1v1s and 4v4s once they finally address these issues. So yeah, let me know what you think about the patch in the comments below. And the most important thing, make sure you subscribe to me on Patreon as well. Sure.